Welcome back everyone to another video with Argo. I'm D-Rec and today I will be discussing the current state of both premium and standard format in regards to current and future cards with possible meta impact and the public perception about them. But before I go into that, I want to talk about some events that are coming up in the next few weeks. For those who don't know, Ultra Reality Games has announced their Fall State Championship for this season and have split both formats into their own respective weekends. Premium format will be held the weekend of October 27th and 28th, and standard format will be held the weekend of November 3rd and 4th. If you're looking for a bit more in the way of competitive play, I highly recommend checking it out. A link to their event website is in the description below, so you can check out which state has stores hosting near you. For all of you New England players watching, we at Argo will be hosting both formats for Fall States, so if you're interested in that level of play, you can check out our events on Facebook, links in the description as well. We will be doing a free giveaway during each event if we have 30 or more players attending. We don't get too much more than boosty events and locals every year, so definitely check it out if you think this will be something for you. Going into today's discussion though, there has been a lot of banter in the online community about certain problem cards and decks in both formats. Starting with standard format, the biggest one that really comes to mind is OTT, and they've had an overwhelming majority of topping in the BCS circuit, as well as some ARGs that have been here and there. It's really important to discuss it just because we do have Murakumo coming out with the AL4 booster this weekend, and everyone's really discussing about how Murakumo is going to impact the flow of top tier decks. We don't know too much about what to expect. We haven't seen it do too well in the Japanese format. Granted, the Japanese format isn't a big way to gauge what to expect in English meta just because the metagame for both formats is very different. However, it is a good way to gauge certain things about the coming meta. And for the most part, we haven't seen them do too much with Murakumo. However, there is a big thing about Murakumo, and it's counter to OTT in the fact that it can stall them very heavily in the regard of the Vanguard stun and ride lock that it can do with the new Zanbaku. So, we don't know what to expect yet, though there is some debate about that. I don't know if it's going to have as much impact as people think it's going to have, but I do hold hope that it does. It will make standard a bit more refreshing in the sense that we won't be seeing OTT top as much, but if it doesn't have that same level of impact that we're expecting out of it, we may still see a lot of OTT in the top 3 and beyond. So take it with a grain of salt. OTT is still a very big problem for standard, and it's making the game very stale, and I don't think it's going to be good and healthy for competitive play going forward. For a premium format, we've got a lot of cards that are on people's minds, and it's kind of the backbone of hate for the format just because it's keeping players that kind of want to try it from trying it because they think it's much bigger as a threat than it actually is. So the first one that comes up is of course Gyze, and I did talk about Gyze in a previous video and how I think it needs to be banned. In the time from when I posted that video up until now, I have changed my perspective about it a little bit. It isn't topping as much as it is talked about how disgusting it is. It tops, it doesn't win consistently. We've seen more in the way of Anj and Luard and Spikes than we have of Gyze. And the same thing goes for your POTT, which falls in the realm of Ichi, Kishima, and Silent Tom. That deck is far too slow and hasn't really won events relative to decks like I said, Luard and Anj. So those who are afraid of those decks don't really need to be. They're not big threats, and I know Solemn Vanguard did a video about them in a current meta deck analysis, but the same thing is, it's true. It's not a big threat to premium format, despite contrary opinion. It's not that bad. And same thing with Gyze. It's a very difficult deck to play against, but it's not unbeatable. And decks don't need to have guaranteed outs to other decks. There are cards that exist that allow you to get around certain things, not outright to beat those combos. And there shouldn't be. If there were outs that directly countered other decks and vice versa, the game would be far too stale because everyone would know exactly what to do. And that's not what competitive play is about. It's about players figuring out how to build around and play around decks that are generally challenging for them in competitive play. Gyze is one of those decks that people generally have to think about that matchup in order to play around it. Certain decks don't have to because they have outs, like Luard has outs, and Chaos does as well. But generally other decks like Spikes and Anj don't have that same level of outs and same level of combos that can guaranteed play around those decks. And they have to kind of play around with what they have in their lineup to figure out just how to approach this matchup. And then, as well as Anj, who is another build that people generally dislike because it's very strong in a format where it doesn't have the support that it should have to keep up. And this is something that I also agree with. I think that Anj is far too strong for a format that is very dependent on having both old and new support. It is only functioning on its old support and doing as well as it was before, with generally being able to do a lot of things really well. And this is something that Solemn Vanguard also talked about a little bit, but generally speaking, Anj has outs to everything. It can generate a ton of power very easily, it can generate multi-attacks very easily, and has a lot of defensive options at their disposal. You've got the Ellie G-Guard that can get so much shield value out of just having PGs and face-up copies of herself in the G-Zone. No other deck has that defensive capability. Ellie can easily hit 50-60k in defensive shield, whereas other decks would need a vast amount of resources to even get to that point. And that's something that is far too crucial in a format where having defensive values as well as offensive values is very prevalent. So that's something that is a little problematic to the format, but because again, it doesn't top as consistently as a deck that is as problematic as people think it is should, it doesn't. And that's why it's not super problematic to premium format. Luard as well, it got better with the Vieira support, but the same thing. It doesn't top that consistently. It does top and it does win, but it's not at that point where it's topping and winning all the time. It tops and wins here and there, and only fairly so because of the support it got. And the same thing for Spikes, and the same thing for Aqua Forest, and so on. The list goes on. And we'll start to see more of this as other decks with Vieira support start getting their support. We'll see that with Golds and the whole Wonder Wrestle combo. We'll start seeing that with Angels and variations of Pure, Rescue, or even Gyze. And then we'll see that possibly with Neo Nectar and New Musketeer stuff, as well as maybe just a generic build, or even Asha might make a return. We don't know yet because we haven't gotten that support, but we can speculate all we want. But it's the same thing as what we're doing now with No Life King. No Life King is a big thing in both Japan and the English format. It isn't topping a whole lot in the Japanese format, but we're expecting it to be very dominant in the English format because of how we play. And once again, we can't really know what to do with it until it comes out. And once we have it and we're able to play it in competitive play, then we can start either A, planning around it and how to beat it, or B, if that's not viable, then we can start planning about what needs to be addressed in competitive play if this deck's going to continue to exist. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you guys have any thoughts about anything else in the current state of the game, as well as certain decks or certain cards that need to be addressed, you can leave it in the comments below. I will be reviewing them and responding to them as often as I can. Generally keep an open mind when discussing things like these, just because that's the whole purpose of videos like these, is about keeping an open mind and being able to communicate thoughts and perspectives about the current state of the meta. So thanks again for watching, guys. Again, definitely check out the links in the description to the Ultra Reality Games events. I definitely think that for those of you who haven't really experienced competitive levels of play, this will be a good way to kind of wean into it a little bit and just get a fresh take on more competition and playing with people that you generally don't play, because that's the whole purpose of competitive play. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.